Okay. Good evening, everyone. We'd like to welcome you to the Hampstead School Board Public Forum for our superintendent search. I'd like to welcome all of you who are participating this evening and who are able to join us. Oh, hold on 1 second. So I do want to go through quickly just how we're going to have this work this evening. And we are going to use the question and answer function, which you should all see at the bottom of your screen. You'll be able to submit questions there. Megan Malcolm and myself, Caitlin Parnell, will be moderating the questions. We do intend to take as many as we can. We've allotted about 45 minutes for each of our candidates. And we will, as I said, get to as many questions as we can. Obviously, if there are duplicates, we may skip over some people's questions, but we, of course, want to get as many done as possible. So at this time, I'm going to introduce our first candidate for Hampstead Superintendent. Mr. Daniel Moulis is joining us this evening. We're very happy to present him to the Hampstead public and the community. And I'm going to turn it over to him to give a brief introduction, and then we will go into questions. So anyone who is attending, you can start submitting questions now, and we'll go ahead and get to those after after Dr. Moulis speaks.
Well, thank you for having me here this evening. It is a great pleasure to be here and speak to all of you and answer your questions. A little bit about my background. I began my career over 20 years ago in education, beginning as a middle school history teacher. Early in my career, I also had the opportunity to teach high school English and social studies, as well as teaching in the upper elementary school level. I've completed 4 degrees in higher education with a Bachelor of Arts in History, a Master of Education in Secondary Education, a Certificate of Advanced Graduate Studies in Administration and Supervision, and most recently a Doctorate of Education. My commitment to the educational excellence for both the school district and myself is what's led me to my pursuit for the doctorate degree. When I studied factors influencing principal turnover and made recommendations to improve this specific issue in the state of New Hampshire, I will bring that level of educational expertise to Hampstead School District to develop and maintain strong administrators, as well as create a foundation for student achievement. I encourage students and educators alike to commit to continuous learning through additional coursework or degrees to support their individual aspirations and goals and contributions to the school district. My administrative experience spans over 13 years, first as an assistant principal, then as a principal at Windham Middle School for 8 years, followed by 2 years as director of curriculum, instructional leadership and operations, and the past 4 years as superintendent for the Barrington School District. The 4 key principles to my approach as a superintendent are the following. 1 is to enable students to achieve success in their career and college readiness, support teachers and staff with resources that they need to provide high quality education, involvement in the community, a focus on the community and school partnerships and family engagement within the school districts that I work with, and the last principle is clear and transparent school budgets that are mindful of the local tax impact. These 4 principles is what I will bring as superintendent of schools if I am fortunate enough to be your next superintendent for the Hampstead School District. During my tenure in Barrington, accomplishments include one-to-one Chromebook initiatives, similar to what Hampstead has completed as well, implementation of the iReady assessment, standards-based grading with an implementation of also social emotional learning assessment known as the DESA assessment. Additional curriculum areas include a focus on the revision during my prior leadership role as director of curriculum, a mathematics revision, reading revision to the curriculum, science curriculum revisions, unified arts curriculum revisions, and social studies curriculum revisions, both as in my role as superintendent and my prior role as director of curriculum and instruction and assessment. Programs initiated include multi-tiered systems of support with academic interventions in reading and social emotional learning to support students. I've also added over my tenure school personnel requests that include a preschool teacher, a social worker, a world language program for 7th and 8th grade students at the middle school, and a reading interventionist at the elementary school level. The last couple of principles I will just speak to very briefly is performing arts programs that include art exhibits at the SAU office, town library, school libraries, student and chorus and music concerts at community events, and working with the Barrington Education Foundation to provide scholarships for students and support reading programs at all of our schools. In addition, working with the community at community events such as Barrington Dancing with the Stars as a judge, working with students that are completing Eagle Scout projects with an outdoor learning classroom at our elementary school, and outdoor educational fitness trail as another Eagle Scout project that was completed at the elementary school. One of the greatest successes this past year was delivering meals to any students in the district when we transitioned to remote learning last spring on day one, and transitioning to remote learning last spring within 2 days of the pandemic. Most recently, this school year, we've created as a team in our school district, teachers, staff, community, parents, and administration, a comprehensive return to school plan that included the successful relaunch of an in-school instruction in September, while also providing a remote learning option for students and families as well. As part of that, we had a parent task force that was part of that return to school model. I'm going to stop there. There's a little bit more, but I'm being cognizant of time, and I think my allotted time, and I'm sure some of the other questions relative to budget and fiscal responsibilities will come up. So I'm going to stop there because I really want the next amount of time really to be about the community and to have them ask me questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Moulis. And don't worry, you got a few minutes chopped off there with our tech problems, but we'll give you that extra time at the end. We do have questions coming in, so I'm going to go ahead and start, and then Megan will take the next question. So our first question is, in 2005, New Hampshire began transitioning to competency-based education, CBE. In the 08-09 school year, the state required local school boards to adopt policies to support CBE. In 2013, the state developed grade level competencies. Yet not all schools in the state are truly competency-based. What experience do you have in leading and supporting competency-based learning? And then as a follow-up, if we get to it, what elements need to be in place in a school to become a true competency-based learning environment?
Oh, that's a great question. And I alluded to a little bit of that in my introductory remarks. In my prior role as director of curriculum, the first few years I was with the Barrington School District, we implemented standards-based grading, which is that first step towards competency-based education. We revised, we had a team of teachers and family as well that really looked at the research grounded in Thomas Guskey's work on standards-based grading. That was also part of my tenure and time as a principal and assistant principal at Wyndham Middle School as well. Within 2 years, we adopted a standards-based grading report card that still had elements of a traditional reporting system, but we also developed with our teachers those common core standards that would be reported out to families. And we used our 4.0 rubric, 4 demonstrating exemplary, 3 meeting the standard, 2 showing progress, and 1 showing some progress, but not as much evidence as needed. So it was on a 1 through 4 scale. And we made those incremental steps and changed our model, but we did it with an approach of also listening to our families as well. So those were the incremental steps we made towards competency-based education. The second part of your question, really looking at competency-based education, is looking at rubrics and assessments, really looking at those assessments and how those are grounded back at the standards. Specifically, I'll talk about science, certain labs that are focused on physical science, focused on life sciences and earth sciences that have those rubrics and demonstrate that level of evidence towards that particular assessment and that particular standard. Those are the true elements that get you closer to competency-based education. It is at minimum a 3 to 5 year process. You start with the research, you work with a team of teachers and families as well. You get their input. We've also looked at surveys also to get family input as well. And that's where we in Barrington developed that reporting model that had elements of standards-based grading, but also had elements of reporting out in a more traditional way. So we took a very blended approach to that, but a true competency-based model would include rubrics and rubrics that were evidence-based, that were grounded back in the power standards.
Thank you. Megan, go ahead.
Okay, so the next question is, can you tell us about a mistake you have made and how it helped you grow as an educator, professional, and/or personally?
Sure. So of course, as a superintendent, there's certain times where you have to make calls, and you make calls based upon the best information that you have at the time. One of those lessons, and I think this came up in my site visit a little bit when I was walking through and touring the schools, and there's no superintendent or any administrator or leader that doesn't make mistakes. It's important to learn from those, but it was my first snow call, and I remember it very vividly. And I mentioned it, I think, in the walkthrough at Hampstead Middle School a little bit. And it was a tough call. It was one of those storms that wasn't a lot of snow, but it was enough that, it could have been challenging, especially on the way to school and on the way home. And I looked at multiple weather reports and thought I made the right call. And then as the day progressed, it didn't feel like the right call. So what I learned from that is, with those types of storms, and what I do, not all the time, but when I need to, is I will travel the roads myself. I've also learned to not only talk to the road agent, but also talk to the police department to get a sense of how many accidents are on the roads in the morning. And that's the level of detail that you'll get from me as superintendent. Is if it requires me to get more information and more detail to make the best decision I can, whether it's a snow call or any decision that I make, then that's what I'm going to do. And I use the snow call example because every superintendent in the state probably looks back and says there's certain snow calls that they would like to go back in time and probably make a different decision. It's just a very easy example to think of.
Thank you. The next question is, what is your opinion on school reopening given the current environment? How do you handle situations where there's public pressure to make a decision contrary to what you think is best?
That's a great question. And I think when we talk about the reopening of schools, that is for all school districts in New Hampshire and across the country, that is something we face. And recently, I listened to the school board meeting minutes this past Tuesday and listened to comments both from school board members and those from the public. That is a concern that Hampstead is continuing to discuss, and all school districts are continuing to discuss. For me personally, and I think for teachers and parents and for students, we all want to get back to in-person instruction. And that's what we did in Barrington. That's what I would recommend we do in Hampstead School District. However, we need to be thoughtful in how we do that. We need to make sure we adhere to those social distancing practices. We decided on 3 feet, 3 to 6 feet is the recommendation. We went with 3 feet, but 3 to 6 feet is that recommendation. Face masks were mandatory. Preschool through 8th grade in our school district. For high school, we send to 3 different high schools. So our school district is preschool through 8th grade. And then we looked at different traffic patterns in the hallways. We looked at different times when students are transitioning classes, particularly at the middle school. We developed a comprehensive return to school plan before the school year ended last year, continued that work throughout the summer with the administrative team, reviewed that with both associations, both the Teachers Association and the Paraprofessional Association, developed memorandums of understanding, developed what their recommendations were. We also worked with the school board on ionizer filters to make sure that we're providing healthy, clean air and more preventative measures to mitigate the risk of the virus from a healthy and safety standpoint. And we used the contingency fund that we have in the school district to make sure that was in place in all the schools. And one of the recommendations was also to do indoor air quality tests. And the teachers and the staff felt very strongly about that. We did 2 tests at the beginning of the year, one before the ionizer filters, one after the ionizer filters. And there was also the request most recently to follow that up at the mid-year point, and we did. So that's, and the return to school plan that's on our website, it's working as a team, working with the school board. The superintendent in isolation needs to listen to his parents. We developed a parent community task force as well. And it was all of us working together, even working with the transportation company and making that recommendation that our buses can only be 50% at capacity, and asking parents to complete a survey to make sure that they would be able to bring their children to school and pick them up to school, knowing that that was one of the safety measures we needed to have in place. And more regular cleaning with our custodial staff, and adding more custodial staff and more cleaning supplies and PPE supplies as needed, and plexiglass as needed. And I saw that in my tours at Hampstead schools as well. So those would be the items that we would look at. I'm a very strong believer that in-school instruction is highly important. I know all school districts want to get back to that point, and we need to do that in a very concerted, safe manner. And I believe that we can do that, you know, in the next few months in the next school year, and with the safety measures in place.
Okay. I'm sorry, I have a child screaming in the background. So the next question is, many of our children have fallen behind or are struggling as a result of remote learning. How are you going to help get the kids back on track to thrive long-term and successfully graduate with their peers in other districts?
It's interesting, Megan, and that question actually came up today. I had a meeting and we were talking about, even with in-school instruction this year, even our in-school instructional model has more breaks for mass breaks, more interruptions to the day. So what we've looked at is our success block time at the middle school and intervention time, to add a little bit more intervention time when we can. And if we can't, we're also talking about a summer school program, and possibly looking at that and extending that for more students and more families, a 5-week program to address that concern, Megan, that you brought forward, as far as working on the remediation and working on the areas that were missed in remote learning instruction. So we've been looking specifically at mathematics and reading, and looking at our assessment scores and iReady and on the state assessment results, and then having those targeted interventions where we are going to invite more students potentially for an extended school year option and that intervention time. One of the other things that I've thought a little bit about and would want to talk more with the administrative team in Hampstead and also with the families in Hampstead and the school board is possibly an after school time where we could provide an hour of after school time to work on particular skills that were missed in the areas of mathematics and reading, but in other subjects as well, science and the arts. And that's something else that we've been talking about as well, because I think that's a real issue that all school districts are facing. And that those would be some of the ways that I would look to create that remediation and make sure that students are graduating with their peers and are ready for college and career readiness.
Thank you. Actually, this next question kind of leads into from what you just ended with. This next question says, you mentioned preparing students for college. How will you help students whose career path may not be college or university bound?
So in working with all 3 of our high schools, we send to Co-Brown Northwood Academy, Dover High School, and Oyster River. We've worked with each of our area high schools to develop different career paths. And those different career paths include the Career Technology Education Center at Dover High School, different career paths, the automotive industry, as well as other industries in the trades. Other career paths as well, ROTC programs, both at Dover and that was similar to my time in Wyndham as well. So those different opportunities and really working with our school districts to provide those opportunities for students, particularly in areas of different career paths, in the arts as well. And also in other areas as well. So that is something that we continue to work with and work towards. And one of the consultations that I have with each of the high schools is we get feedback from each of our families, and that feedback is disseminated back from each of the high schools on what different career paths students are looking for and families are looking for. And we've made even some changes at the middle school level for different career paths as well. And I saw that in my visit last week at Hampstead Middle School, 3D printing, different automotive carpentry trades as well. And those are some of the areas that we've been focusing on at the middle school level as well, as the drafting, the architectural design. So those are different paths that we've also implemented more at the middle school level and worked with our local high schools as well.
The next question is, Barrington is similar to Hampstead in that the Barrington School District sends their kids to a high school outside of town. Barrington's cost per student is about 20 to 25% lower than the state average. How have you, as the superintendent of the school district, been able to provide a high quality of education while being able to be well under the state average of cost per student? And what have you learned from balancing budget and education that you would plan to bring to the Hampstead School District?
Well, that was part of my introductory statement that I didn't have a chance to get to, Megan. So I'm glad that you asked that question. We've had different capital improvement projects, and I know Hampstead is looking at a renovation capital improvement project as well at Hampstead Central School. Those improvement projects include a paving project at our elementary school 3 years ago that came in under budget. One of the things that I look at particularly is budget lines and expenditures over a 3 to 5 year trend analysis. And if there are areas where we haven't been expending those lines that we can make some corrections in the budget in particular account lines, then we will do that. Looking at different reserve accounts to fund capital improvement projects, such as that paving project I mentioned, we utilized our capital reserve account to pay almost entirely for that $500,000 project and came in under budget. Particularly, I also look at other funding resources, additional grants. This year, we received money. I'm similar to Hampstead, different CARES and ESSER grants. I've applied twice with the Commissioner of Education utilizing our contingency fund. We ended up not having to use that for the ionizer filters. That was over $110,000. Plexiglass, PPE, all of that was, I look very strategically at other funding sources not to burden the taxpayer. And then when we do make additional personnel requests, I make sure that we articulate those personnel requests to the public. And just recently, we had our deliberative session last Saturday. I know Hampstead School District had their deliberative session last week as well. As part of the PowerPoint that I create, I clearly articulate what our accomplishments were in the last year, what our challenges are as a district, what are the budget drivers, what our capital reserve account balances are, and I break down by function code each of the areas of the budget: salaries, benefits, special education, transportation, food service. So the community can see not only the transparency, but the delineation of the budget. Warrant articles are clearly articulated, the expenditures and the budget report and the deliberative session is all clearly articulated, and we make that all available for the public to review and ask questions. And we've successfully, during my tenure and even prior to my tenure, that has been one of the most important lessons, is really to clearly communicate what those particular budget asks and requests are, but also being very transparent and communicating that process to the public, letting them know all the expenditures, letting them know everything that is in the budget. That is very important to me.
Thank you. Next is, Hampstead is a K-8 district. I will amend this question a little bit. You know that we have high school students and they're still part of our district, although they go to Pinkerton. Why do you wish to leave your current district and come to Hampstead?
So that question came up in actually the first interview, and my answer is going to be pretty much identical to what I said that day. Hampstead is forming their own school district. They've been part of SAU 55, which is Timberlane and Hampstead. This is a great opportunity where, as a community, as a school district, you're creating your own vision, your own goals, separate from SAU 55, and creating your own path now. And not that you haven't before, but now it's Hampstead School District. It's not Timberlane and Hampstead School District. That's what attracted me to this position. I feel that it's a very exciting thing to have your own strategic plan, your own goals, and to really articulate that to the community and work together. And that really excites me as far as that vision and that pathway to support students. And that's why I'm interested in the position in Hampstead.
Okay, so this next question is interesting. What is your education philosophy related to American history and the recent 1619 project, the critical race theory, and other recent education trends?
So most recently, I'm taking a course right now on equity in education. And it is very important as a history teacher to provide lots of perspectives about history and for students to read resources and fiction, nonfiction resources of history. But as a former history teacher myself, it is really important to have students recognize there are certain points in history that were not necessarily good or great parts of our history. And we have to teach those parts of history, but we also history has been very much with a specific perspective that's been very American and Euro specific, European specific. And it's really important to make sure with our curriculum in history that we have that broadened out and provide different opportunities in other areas of history, African American studies, Native American history as well, and provide all that is our history, not only in the United States, but geopolitically and across the world. Those perspectives are important now more than ever. And it's really important in the world. We are a world that's very world centric, and it's not just the United States. And we need to make sure that we understand history across this, not only this country, but across this world.
Thank you. Next question is, how would you describe your management style?
So I use multiple different forms, but the best two that I would describe is collaborative and also distributive. And the collaborative is working well with teams, the administrative team, working well with families, making them part of different committees that we have, getting their engagement and part of the process when we're looking at different change agents and initiatives within the school district and various schools, working with the school board chair and school board members with specific working committees, such as a facilities committee, policy committee, and other district committees that we have, curriculum committees. And then also the distributive management style, which is site-based management, and specifically principals are operating their schools and providing them the opportunities to lead their schools, and very much having distributive leadership with the management team at the SAU level as well. Providing my input, but also having them have a say and lead their particular departments in technology, business and finance, facilities, etc.
Okay. The next question is, do you believe in charging taxpayers for right to know requests?
That's a really good question. When we receive a right to know request, if it's a request that isn't at a cost to the district, particularly and a lot of right to know requests, we don't charge in Barrington. If it's a right to know request that requires a lot of copying or requires a lot of cost, then that may be a different discussion. But when we don't have to for a right to know request, then we don't. And in most cases, when I've received those, we haven't had to. If the request is a little bit more detailed, that requires more documentation, it may require more copying and things like that. I use copying as an example, but in most cases, we haven't had to charge for right to know requests.
Okay. The next question we have is, I'm sorry, I have to get the right screen in front of me to read it. Okay. If one of your buildings sent you a hire for a final interview and you didn't have a good impression of the candidate, how would you handle it?
Yep. So what I would do is I would call first the principal that is in charge of that school. And, I would tell them that it may be, in a lot of cases, this can happen, that you will need to go back and potentially reconvene the committee and have a separate search. That doesn't happen often, but as superintendent of schools, if I have a sense that it might not be the right hire for the district, then that is the charge of the superintendent to be the final say on that. So if it happens, then, it starts with a conversation with the principal, and then it means reconvening the search committee. And if need be, again, looking at different applicants and starting the search process over again.
Okay. The next question is, what would your spending priorities be? And if you had to, what is the first area that you would cut?
So my spending priorities are focused on the students and the teachers and giving them the resources they need. But like I mentioned earlier, if there are particular expenditure lines that have not been spent over a 3 to 5 year average, particularly 3 years, then if there's certain areas where we can offset that and make some budgetary cuts that in certain areas and certain cost items, then we will do that. And I have done that. So if there's a particular area that hasn't been expended year over year on a 2 to 3 year basis, then there will be an average a cut cost to those particular line items in those areas, because over a 3 year average they haven't been spent. So I would look very judiciously at particular account lines that haven't been spent. But I always also recognize my first question is, what is the impact on students and what is the impact on teachers and staff? And if it is going to be a detrimental, significant impact, then I also won't make that cut. And then there are some examples in the last year with transportation, where in the springtime we were not utilizing all of our transportation. So we were able to work with our bus company and receive a fuel cost rebate that was very significant for the last third of the school year. And I use that as an example because that is the type of superintendent you'll be getting from me, is to look very judiciously at account lines that can potentially be a cost savings. Then I'm going to look to make those cost savings on behalf of the taxpayers and on behalf of the district.
Okay, now we're switching to a technology question. Technology departments support all district functions. What is your knowledge and experience in leading a school district in the area of technology?
So working with our director of technology, we talk about what the vision is for technology. What's the vision to support student learning, and where is that going in the future? Where is that going to be in 5 years? Where is that going to be in 10 years? Specifically, similar to Hampstead, we've had the one-to-one Chromebook initiative where all students have that as a resource. So whenever we need to transition to remote learning, every student in the district has a computer and has that as a resource. One of the areas in my walkthroughs at Hampstead Middle School and Hampstead Central School is I would like to look at, and I want to talk with the director of technology about this, interactive whiteboards, particularly in the areas of mathematics and science. Those are two particular areas when we talk about the STEAM initiative and the STEAM goals that Hampstead School District has. That interactive ability to solve a math problem, to complete a science experiment, or work on a science problem, with the interactive whiteboards is so important. I'd also look to that with some of the unified arts classes, particularly the robotics, the STEM classes. Those classes as well have the potential, as well as art classes, where interactive whiteboards is another creative way to create architectural design, drafting, and artist work. So those would be the areas that I would look at as far as technology. I'd also look at the infrastructure with the director of technology. How are we doing from an infrastructure side? How is the bandwidth? How's the internet connectivity in our school district? Do we need to add more bandwidth and more infrastructure to our technology? And so those would be some of the goals that we would look at. And we'd look at a 5 to 10 year plan of what we want for the school district as far as technology needs to support our students and support our teachers.
Okay, next question is, sorry, looking at a different screen now. How would you create your strategic plan? And what is something foundational that you believe that should be included?
So that was actually one of my questions in the first interview that I had with the Hampstead School District. I did notice that your strategic plan currently is coming to completion, and you're about to start a new strategic plan. So my question was, where were you in that process? So as if I am afforded the opportunity to be your next superintendent, we would be working early on to develop that strategic plan committee. It would be comprised of school board members. A couple of school board members would be on that committee. It would be comprised of parents, community members, teachers, and staff. We would have multiple meetings over that first year, administration as well, to review what we'd want in that strategic plan. One of the pillars that is most important to me is everything needs to be going towards what is the success of our students. And I developed a vision statement, what I thought for Hampstead School District. I'm just going to share a couple points of that. So the vision statement really, and I just have, bear with me for 1 minute, is providing students the wings for Hampstead students to soar to new heights towards their future goals and aspirations. And a draft of that strategic plan would include the following pillars. It would include what you're currently working on, which is that facilities plan, that two-phase school facilities plan for Hampstead Central School. It would also include curriculum instruction assessment as another pillar, an adoption of a curriculum revision cycle for all content areas, reading, mathematics, the performing arts, science, etc. A social emotional learning pillar would be part of that strategic plan. And then lastly, a technology and infrastructure would be one of the other pillars of that strategic plan. I would get feedback from families, I get feedback from the community, I get feedback from the school board. There would be a final reviews of that plan after the committee has provided their feedback. We'd also get survey feedback from parents and families in the community. And by the end of next school year, that draft plan would go forward to the school board and the administrative team. And then that would be our roadmap for our next 5 years. And that would be what we would use as those pillars to achieve the next steps of Hampstead School District and the greatness that's already occurring and continuing that pathway forward.
Great, thank you. There's one question that's not a question, but a good clarification. I previously said Hampstead was K through 8. We do have someone who wants to point out that Hampstead is actually preschool through 8. So I do want to clarify that because they are absolutely correct. So the next question is, currently board agenda documents are not available to the public, even after the conclusion of the meeting. A password is required to access those documents, even though they are public documents. Will you eliminate the current practice?
Well, if you look at the Barrington School District website, what we've done is, and you're getting a sense from me right now, hopefully, our board agendas are available. All of our school board agendas are there, and supporting information is there. That's part of the public meeting. And we do make that available. There's certain items that will be discussed at the meeting that might not be part of the board packet. For instance, if we're reviewing a financial statement with the school board and I provide those over the course of the year, those are usually ready the day or two before the meeting. What I do and what my practice has been and my predecessor's practice has been is that Friday, we send out the school board agenda, all the supporting materials that are part of the public meeting to the school board, and we have that readily available on our website. That to me is very important. It includes the policies that are going to be reviewed. It includes, for instance, we're about to have a mid-year review, a mid-year report for our March 2nd meeting. It will include iReady assessment reports from our director of curriculum and any other reports that are reported out that are part of the public meeting. To me, that's important to provide that level of not only communication, but transparency to the community and to parents of what are we discussing? What are the items that are part of the agenda? And if it's a part of a public meeting, to me, that's really important to do. So I don't have a password on the Barrington School District website for our public meetings. Minutes are posted. It's readily available. That would be something that I would want to implement for Hampstead School District. It just creates that further communication and transparency with everyone in the community.
Thank you, Dr. Mullis. Megan, do you have any more? I think we may have reached the end of what we had.
I could have one more.
Go for it.
Question myself. So actually, you answered this very well in our first meeting. I'd like you to explain to the community how you stay engaged with the community.
I'm really glad that you asked that question, Megan. I had that in my introductory statement, and obviously I stopped because I wanted to make sure the questions were answered. One of the areas of strength of mine, and I get this from my father, he was a superintendent as well in the North Country, is it's very important to be visible in the community. You will see me at different events. You will see me at chorus concerts, band concerts, other community events. You will see me out in the public. You will see me at art exhibits. It's really important. Today, for instance, I was walking through the middle school and students knew who I was. And some of the students were saying, hey, there's the guy that makes the snow calls. Hey, that's the superintendent. And so it's important that the students know who I am. They see me walking through the schools, being visible, being present. As I mentioned in the first interview, Megan had heard this. Each week I make a point to have instructional rounds, at least at one of the schools. I try to in all of the schools in a week. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't. But at the minimum, I make sure I make instructional rounds to at least one of the 3 schools on a given week. And some weeks it's all 3 of the schools. That's really important to me. And sometimes when there needs to be extra help at recess duty or lunch duty, and I have the time in my schedule, I've done that as superintendent of schools. And that's who you'll get from me as superintendent. That's who I am as a person. And that's really a tribute to my family, who were, both my parents were in education.
Yeah.
Welcome.
I think that concludes our questions. If you have anything else, Dr. Mullis, that you wanted to say or speak kind of directly to our community, feel free. Not to put you on the spot. Oh, wait a minute. I apologize. There might be one more question that came in. I'm trying to monitor both. Oh, I don't. Okay. Nope. I was wrong. Sorry. Sorry. The technology part of this for me is. So I'm sorry. If there is anything else that you wanted to say to us, to say to the Hampstead community, feel free.
I'm just going to provide a brief closing statement, if that's okay. As superintendent, okay. As superintendent who cares about the students, staff, and community, that is the foundation of who I am as an educator and as a person. And that was, I believe, Megan's question there at the end. In the school districts I've worked for and have had the privilege to work for, I make that investment. And hopefully that has come through tonight in our conversation today. I make that investment to provide the very best education and opportunities for our students. That is most important. This means continuous improvement for myself as a leader, for myself, and provide that for our students and provide that for the school district, always looking to continuously improve. And that is who you will get from me as a superintendent. And while also providing for staff professional development opportunities, curriculum and instructional resources for teachers, staff, and administrators to support their curriculum, instruction, and schools to continue to make Hampstead School District an exceptional educational institution. The parents, the community of Hampstead will continue to be proud of Hampstead schools while planning and having a vision for the future and a strategic plan for the future, for the students and for future generations of students. That is what you will receive from me as superintendent of schools if I am afforded the opportunity. You have a wonderful school district, and thank you for the opportunity to be here this evening.
Dr. Mullis, thank you so much for joining us. We really enjoyed, those of us on the search committee have gotten to know you a bit, and, we were really proud to present you as one of our finalists to the community. So we appreciate you being here this evening.
Okay. Thank you for having me. Have a great evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, you as well. Okay, for everyone, we are going to next have Mr. Robert Thompson join us. We are going to get him, should be joining in just a moment. Bless you. I think what we are going to do, just so those of you who have been on since the beginning know, we still have the questions in the question box that we asked to Dr. Moulis. So you are more than welcome to submit additional questions. We will try to make sure we're asking similar questions. So if new questions come in, we will use those. But if they don't, we are going to use the ones that we utilized for Dr. Moulis as well. Just seems the fair way to go and doesn't put pressure on people to come up with new questions. But we do welcome additional questions. So if you have something that has come up as you've been watching, please go ahead and add it in. And we'll give Mr. Thompson a few moments here.
Yes, Caitlin, if you're ready, I'm going to mute my microphone and shut my video off and give him a call so he knows to get on the call now.
Okay, great. Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Thompson. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Of course. So we do have the Hampstead community here. They have queued up some good questions. So what we're going to do is Megan and I will take turns asking the questions that come in, and we will get going. But first, we'd like to give you the opportunity to speak to the community, kind of give an introduction of yourself, and we'll go from there. So the floor is yours to give your introduction.
Yeah, wonderful. And Caitlin, before I get started, can I ask how many community members do we have joining us?
I believe we're at about 55 right now.
Wonderful.
So that's where we are right now. And I know that we have an active social media presence. Usually we have someone giving the play-by-play. So I think there are probably some additional members following along that way.
Wonderful. That's great to see the large number of community members that showed up for this event. So I want to thank the members of the Hampstead community for coming out this evening, even if it is from the comfort of your living room. I wish the circumstances were different, that we could meet in person. I look forward to the prospect of future opportunities for us to meet face to face. My name is Bob Thompson. I currently serve as one of two assistant superintendents for SAU 41. SAU 41 is the school districts of Hollis, Brookline, and the Hollis Brookline Cooperative, which is grades 7 through 12. It is 6 schools, approximately 2,400 students. We have approximately 400 staff members and an operating budget of approximately $50 million. My role in SAU 41 is the Assistant Superintendent of Student Services. Essentially, I manage an operating budget of $8 to $10 million. It depends on the year. And I have one role, and that is to ensure that students get what they need in order to be successful when they step through the doors of our Hollis and Brookline schools. This year has been a very unique year for everyone, including public educators. In this year, my primary role is I have led the pandemic response for SAU 41. That was an assignment given to me by the superintendent of schools, given my extensive experience in emergency management and safety. In March, that was pivoting to remote learning and ensuring that our teachers had the resources they need to teach and our students had the resources they needed to learn. In late spring, early summer, that was developing a return to school plan we engaged a variety of stakeholders in that process. There was a total of 60 people, including teachers, support staff, administrative assistants, community members, law enforcement. And that plan that we developed provided parents with the opportunity to choose a fully in-person experience, but also a remote experience. And the remainder of the school year, really, we have been working on continuity of operations, keeping our schools open amidst a pandemic. My previous experience, I've been in education for a little over 20 years. I was the principal of Hallsbrook Middle School. I was also the dean of students of Souhegan High School in Amherst, New Hampshire. I was a social studies teacher in the middle school, 7th and 8th grade. I was also a paraeducator, a substitute teacher as well. A really important piece of the work that I've done has been community engagement, and I'm very proud of the work that I've done in the community. I'm an active member of the Community Action for Safe Teens. I've also served on the Somersworth School Board, the Milford Budget Advisory Committee, the Dover Solid Waste Advisory Commission, which was an interesting volunteer effort. I've also helped to run several community outreach programs with the Dover Police Department, and I've done a lot of community work with the Hollis Police Department as well. Personally, I consider myself a little bit of a hometown boy. I grew up on the Derry side of Big Island Pond. I went to Pinkerton Academy. I spent a lot of time growing up in Hampstead. I had a lot of friends, people I have maintained some communication with, some that may even be on the call tonight. I was a graduate of the University of New Hampshire. I've been married for a little over 20 years. I actually met my wife at Dover Middle School. I was the social studies teacher on the team, and she was the science teacher. I have said to the committee that, being an NSAU leader and being married to a teacher provides me with a unique perspective. I've never forgot where I came from. And I also realize the important role that teachers and other support professionals play in the classroom every single day. I have a daily constant reminder of that. I have 3 children. I have a 7th grader, a 5th grader, and a kindergartner. And again, they provide me with a very unique perspective on the diversity of learners. All 3 of my children are very different learners. And it's a constant reminder that as an educational leader, my #1 goal is to ensure that students have a customized and individualized education, because no 2 children, even from the same family, are alike. Lastly, why Hampstead? Hampstead it's a destination district. You have a community that places incredibly high expectations on your teachers. The teachers place incredibly high expectations on their students, and students have high expectations for themselves. This is an environment that I've worked in. I've worked in a lot of high achieving schools. My role in a high achieving school is to take great schools and make them even better. A part of my philosophy is a commitment to continuous improvement. It doesn't matter how good we are, we can always be better. That's been my mantra in every role that I've had. And then finally, what really sealed the deal for me was the school visit I did last week. I had the opportunity to visit the middle school and had Mrs. Denola give me a tour, and Mr. Collins gave me a tour of the central school. And I had the opportunity to talk to a few students, some parents, and some teachers. And the tremendous amount of pride that folks have in the Hampstead school, you feel it from the second you walk through the door. There's a lot of pride for the schools in Hampstead. And even in some of the conversations I've had to talk to individuals who grew up in Hampstead, they received their education in the Hampstead Public Schools. They went off and had the college experience. They were given every opportunity in the world, and they came back to Hampstead. And in some ways, they came back to Hampstead to receive a quality education. That's a school system I want to be a part of. And I'm hoping if I get the job that on July 1, in some small way, it's a little bit of a homecoming for me. And I'm really hoping to be part of the Hampstead school community as the next superintendent of schools.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. Okay, we have questions ready. So the first one is, in 2005, New Hampshire began transitioning to competency-based education, CBE. In the 08-09 school year, the state required local school boards to adopt policies to support CBE. In 2013, the state developed grade level competencies, yet not all schools in the state are truly competency-based. What experience do you have leading and supporting competency-based learning? and what elements need to be in place in a school to become a true competency-based learning environment?
That's a great question. And I have a tremendous amount of experience actually going back to my days as a teacher in the Dover school systems. But more importantly, I think my experience at Sauhegan High School, as many of you know, Sauhegan High School is a member of the Coalition of Essential Schools, and a big component of what Sauhegan does is competency-based education. And I think in its simplest form, there's really 4 questions that we need to ask when we're looking at competency-based education. What is it that we want all students to know? How is it that we know that they learned it? What do we do for those students who have not learned it? And what do we do for those students who already know it? If we can break those competency-based learning down into those 4 really simple components that are easy to understand for students, for parents, like that's the core. That's where competency-based learning begins. But we also have to balance that with the autonomy that teachers need to walk into their classroom and be able to teach to their strengths, their talents, and their creativity. So standards-based learning, competency-based learning really is a balance. Teachers need to know what the expectations are for what they want students to know. And then my job as the superintendent is to be able to support that work and giving them resources to be able to, for students to have quality outcomes.
Sorry, taking notes.
No problem. And let me know, Megan, if I'm speaking too fast. I can
Oh,
slow
no,
down.
no.
I get excited about this stuff.
I could tell. No, it's
Yeah.
good. So the next question is, can you tell us about a mistake that you have made and how it helped you grow as an educator, professional and/or personally?
Yes, I make a lot of mistakes. In fact, some of the worst advice I ever received was from a mentor of mine who said, never apologize. And I don't subscribe to that sort of thinking, because I think, especially as an educational leader, people need to see that you make mistakes, that you own them, and that you grow from them. And I make mistakes all the time. Earlier this week, the superintendent entrusted me to make the snow call. And I called the day of school, and it probably could have been an early release. I've learned from that. Well, first of all, you can't control the weather, but I certainly learned from that mistake. I'll share with you what I think is the mistake that I think lives with me every day. I was the dean of students at Sauhegan High School, and there were 2 students that were involved in a home invasion in the town of Mount Vernon, which resulted in the death of a community member. And that was a very tragic situation for our school. Later in the year, we were approached by the yearbook advisor who had asked us, she had a dilemma. Should we include the 2 students who were involved in the home invasion in the yearbook? And ultimately, we made the decision that they should be included. They were graduating, they were members of that class. That decision really caused a lot of pain in the community. And I remember at the time, I was a member of that team, and I really feel as though I probably did not put enough reflection into that decision. And as a result, it caused a lot of pain in the community. And it really made me stop and pause as an educational leader. That was my first or second year as an educational leader. And I realized every single decision that comes before you, and there's hundreds of them every day, you really need to give every decision the thought and reflection that it's due, because the decisions that we make have huge consequences. And that's a decision, you know, I gave you an example of a small one, those things that we make every day, and then a big one that, you know, here we are, we're a decade later, and I still think about that decision almost every day.
Thank you. Our next question is, please describe how students in Hollis Brookline are attending school this year, for example, hybrid, remote, in person, and how you have made decisions about instruction during this pandemic.
That is a great question. And that's a question I think that we ask ourselves every single day, just because of the nature of educating children in a pandemic. And I'm so incredibly proud of the educators, the teachers, the support staff members that I work with every day. They are pioneers. They have given their heart and soul during this pandemic. I am incredibly proud to call myself an educator. And I think, the first thing when I reflect on the plans that we developed to get children back into school, what was big for us was parent choice. There were parents that felt that they were comfortable sending their children to school, and there were other parents that were not comfortable with sending their children to school. We were fortunate that we have a very collaborative relationship with our teachers and our teacher association. So we developed a memorandum of understanding that allowed for in-person learning. And really, we rolled up our sleeves. In fact, we began the return to school planning the day after the governor announced that schools would be closed for the rest of the year. We assembled a talented team of individuals and said, all right, what do we got to do to make this work? And really every day we wake up and ask ourselves that same question. Every day, I'm the point person for COVID. And that means that on a daily basis, I'm getting a text message from a principal, from a school nurse, saying that we have a case in our schools. How do we want to handle that? How do we communicate that? How does that impact learning? How do we transition, which we have to do quite often, from a remote environment to an in-school environment? Just like the Hampstead School District, this week I'm having a lot of conversations with school board members and administrators about what are we doing after February break? Is it prudent for us to return to school, knowing that there are some people that are traveling? We also are managing clusters. We've recently seen one with one of our sports teams. The running a school, even under normal circumstances, it's a very complex operation with a lot of moving pieces. And COVID has added an additional layer to that. And I really, again, I go back to just the talented individuals that have just put their heart and soul into this year. It's been a really challenging year. There was no playbook for it. And I think that I have to commend the educators, not just in the district that I work, but across the country. They've really done a phenomenal job. They've been the glue during this pandemic.
Thank you. So the next question is, many of our children have fallen behind or are struggling as a result of remote learning. How are you going to help get the kids back on track to thrive long-term and successfully graduate with their peers in other districts?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I'll go back to the visit that I had last week. I was incredibly impressed with some of the brief conversations that I had with educators. So first of all, Hampstead School District is already doing has a number of initiatives in place that address that question, even in non-pandemic times. Again, it goes back to the 4 essential questions, one of which being, what happens when students don't learn what we wanted them to learn, whether that's related to a pandemic or not. And if you look at the systems that Hampstead already has in place, you have response to instruction. So essentially you have teachers and paraeducators working really closely together to use data, evidence to determine where the gaps are with their kids, and then to build in scaffold instruction in order to close those gaps. You also look at the Universal Design for Learning, which is another initiative of the Hampstead School District. The whole idea about UDL is access, providing all students access points to be able to access their curriculum. So you begin with those structures. There are already strong structures in place. That makes my job as a superintendent easy. I don't have to create those structures. They're successful, they're evidence-based. I'm going to come in on July 1 and I'm going to support those systems. I'm going to look at the resources that are dedicated to teaching and learning, and I'm going to support that. And because you have those systems in place, we can go through and identify a long-range plan for every child. And we need to start by looking at this year's juniors. They're going to be seniors next year. There is an urgency to getting them caught up, specifically looking at students that are looking to take calculus next year. It is really important that we're bridging the gap. I'm going to work with Pinkerton to make sure that our students that are taking calculus are prepared. And we need to be able to make sure that they have the resources so that when they leave high school next year, they are able to have the skills that they need to be successful. But that is also true even of students with disabilities who might access part of their educational program in the community. Those students have not been able to access their program. So we need to look at building community partnerships, allowing for the opportunity for students with disabilities to get out into the community. That also included students who are engaged in extended learning opportunities. So you really have to look at the big picture. You have to look at the spectrum from kindergarten all the way to grade 12, filling gaps. There's also an urgency because we know what the research says about reading. If a child is not reading at grade level by grade 3, they have an increased risk of not only being a struggling learner, but also of dropping out of school. So we have to target resources for that age group as well, so that we can ensure that we are not leaving any child behind as a result of the time that we've spent in this pandemic.
Thank you. For members of the community who are watching, I'm just going to tell you we're skipping around a little bit because we've got questions coming in 2 different ways. So I promise we're still going to try to get to everybody. Okay, the next question, Mr. Thompson, is what is your opinion on school reopenings, which we have been talking about, and how do you handle public pressure to make a choice contrary to what you think is right?
Well, you know, as a systems leader, there's always public pressure. We could be talking, at our high school, we're talking about class rank. There's a lot of public pressure there. Any given year, there's public pressure. And if there's not, perhaps I'm not doing my job. So public pressure just comes with the game. But particularly, there is no silver bullet for reopening. I would love to tell you that, we could take the Halls Brookline reopening plan, we could apply it to Hampstead, and we're going to open up our schools. And Dr. Metzler mentioned this at the last school board meeting. It's not, it's complex. There are collective bargaining agreements. There's a memorandum of understanding with the Hampstead Teachers Association. We have to carefully look at that. We have to engage community in a conversation about how we reopen our schools, because at the end of the day, it is critically important that we reopen the schools. And a goal of mine would be for us to have a full reopening in the fall. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to get there. This will be a very busy summer. And I would argue that all of the work that all of our schools have done from last spring to this summer will be equal to the work that needs to be done this summer to prepare our schools for whatever the fall will look like, whether that's a full reopening or hybrid. But the reality is, I would tell you, and it may be an unpopular opinion, but I think remote learning does not offer the same high quality that in-person instruction does. I also am gravely concerned about student depression. A hallmark of the work that I've done has been in social and emotional learning, also in suicide prevention. I'm a NAMI Connect trainer, National Alliance for Mental Illness trainer. I've worked very closely because I've personally and professionally have been impacted by suicide. And I know that students experiencing remote learning, some of those students are experiencing feelings of depression and isolation. We need to support those students. And so that work of, planning for the return to school, we're going to have to roll up our sleeves. There's a lot of conversations that need to be had with the board, with the association, with the administrators, with parents, with the community at large, with emergency responders, with the Department of Health and Human Services. I sit in on the weekly call, as many other educators do, with Dr. Benjamin Chan, the state epidemiologist. And it is amazing, the collective, power of that group in really trying to brainstorm ways that we can keep children safe, but we can also reopen our schools as well.
Thank you for that. The next question is, how will you help students whose career path may not be college or university based?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's really 3 goals. And again, most of the decisions that I make as an educator are really based upon my experience as a father and what I want for my 3 kids. And when my 3 kids have gone through their K through 12 experience, there's really 3 conditions that need to be met. The first one is I want them to have enjoyed the experience. I want them to leave and reflect and look back as I would on my public school experience and believe that it was a good one. And a lot of that has to do with not only their academics, but their social emotional well-being. The second condition for my children is I want them to have whatever skills it is that they need to be successful, all of the opportunity that they want, sometimes we heavily focus on that 4-year experience, but we also have a number of students that go into trade schools. We actually have a number of students that will go to work for mom and dad for a small business that someday they're going to run. And really what that's about is engaging kids at a very early age in what are you passionate about? What is it that you want to do? How can the school be able to support your endeavors? And that's us working closely with our school administrators, with Pinkerton Academy. We're very fortunate that there's such a high quality of program, including the vocational offerings at Pinkerton. If you dream it, if you believe it as a kid, then we can do it. And again, it comes down to a customized and personalized education for every kid. And just finally getting back to, I said there's 3 conditions that I want for my children and for all kids. And that third condition, which is really important, in fact, it may be the most important, I want them to be a good person. I want them to leave the public school system, and I want them to go on to do whatever it is that they dream and to treat others kindly. And so, that I think is something that has evolved. It's evolved for me as a parent, as I've seen my own children grow through the public school experience.
Thank you. Okay, there is a lot of change happening in Hampstead. New SAU, new superintendent, new technology and curriculum director, new central school principal, and maybe more. Knowing what you know about Hampstead, how would you organize the SAU structure? How would you go about getting up to speed quickly and being a leader of change?
That's a great question. And that's actually a big question. So before I answer that question, I want to congratulate Mr. Collins. He's had an incredible career in the Hampstead schools, and I wish him the best in his future endeavors, which my brief conversation with him last week involves spending a lot of time with the grandchildren. I also want to congratulate Michael Flynn. Michael's a very talented individual. He's done a lot of great work for the Hampstead schools. And I know that he's going to move over to Hopkinton and do a wonderful job as their superintendent. And I really believe that is testament, Michael's journey is testament to the Hampstead schools, where you've cultivated leadership that can leave this district and go on to other experiences. That says a lot about the district. And I would also say, a really robust and dynamic learning institution has the capacity for really talented people to come to the district and then leave, because we are the sum of our parts. The whole is greater than each individual piece. And, I actually find it fairly exciting that I'm going to help to build a new leadership team. Again, we're committed to constant improvement in the Hampstead School District. And that this provides us the opportunity to bring in some really talented people, some talented people with new ideas that can help push us forward, some talented people that, may actually have some contrasting skill sets to the superintendent. I believe in collaborative leadership. The people that we bring in, they're very important hires, because we're going to make decisions together. This is not, the superintendent has spoken and so shall it be. When we look at the positions that you named, those are critical positions. I do believe that, a talent that I have is networking with people in the association. And when I heard of Michael's moving over and I heard about Mr. Collins, I right away was starting to think, well, who do I know? First of all, do we have talented people within our organization that we've cultivated that can move into those positions, for the continuity piece? And then who do we know? It's a small state that will come in that have the talent to manage things like curriculum, things like technology, or to run an elementary school. So I know, those positions being vacant can be a little unsettling for folks in Hampstead. You have people that have really strong reputations, but I also see it as an opportunity to bring in some really talented people. People who work in education, they want to come to Hampstead. It's a really quality school system. We'll fill those positions. We will fill them quickly. We're not going to wait until June or July. And I believe that at the end of the day, when we start the 2021 school year, we are going to find that we've hired some very talented people.
So I think you've answered this question indirectly throughout a lot of what you've been saying, but I'll ask the question directly. Why do you wish to leave your current district and come to Hampstead?
Yeah, and I think part of it is so the last couple of weeks have been interesting for me because a number of people in Hollis have approached me because they found out I was a finalist in Hampstead. There's some anger and there's some sadness, and I've been asked that question a lot by my colleagues here in the district. And the bottom line is, I'm not really. I have a very good position here. I feel like I'm in a position where I've done some really solid work. There's more work to be done because there always is. But I also feel like this is a great opportunity. There are so many parallels between the Hampstead School District and the Hollis School District. Again, going back to it's a high achieving district. You know, the students that attend from Hampstead that attend Pinkerton Academy, you know, they have some of the highest SAT scores. So do the students in Hollis. There's a commitment, you know, by the families in both Hampstead and Hollis to support the school budget. They want a school that has strong resources because they have high expectations. And I feel like if this is the time, you know, for me to, you know, move my career along in that direction, Hampstead is the place to do it.
Thank you. Do you believe in charging taxpayers for right to know requests?
That's a very interesting question, and that can be a loaded question as well. So I'm gonna indirectly answer it, and then I will directly answer that question. We need, as a school community, to operate in an environment where we don't have right to know requests. And I know that sometimes that's a tall order, but you need a superintendent who is transparent with the community, that can come in and build trust, someone that's going to be in the community, that's going to engage in community partnerships, so that when people are looking for information, they feel like they have it, and they don't always need to go to the evidence to prove that. Now, that's easier said than done. Trust is built over time. You know, as a colleague of mine and a mentor would say, you know, Ted Hall would say, trust is built through the work. You know, I have to come in as the new person and I need to build trust with the community. What you will see as a result of that work is that we will not have right to know requests. You know, and I don't know the backstory, but to answer that question directly, you know, if we are in a position where there are expenses that the district are incurring that otherwise would be resources that would go to support the learning of students, because again, my job as a superintendent is to ensure that the resources that I'm provided, the financial resources that I'm provided, go directly to teachers in the classroom, because they are the ones that support high achievement for teachers and support staff. So if we are in a position where right to know requests are hindering my ability to do that, then I think that we need to look at what expenses, you know, the community might need to incur.
Okay, the next question is, what is your education philosophy related to American history and the recent 1619 project, the critical race theory, and other recent education trends?
So, you know, I was a social studies teacher for a decade, and you know, I would argue that, you know, when it comes to the teaching of social studies in particular, and as many folks know, you know, we've been waiting for the new social studies standards from the state for many, many years. And the reason why we haven't received those standards are because they are politically charged. It's really difficult to develop social studies standards, particularly in, you know, the political climate that we exist in. And so when it comes to, you know, us teaching social studies standards, having conversations about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, because we have to have those conversations. They have to be community conversations. If we're going to be talking about what it is that we're going to teach our children, we certainly, you know, look at the standards that are provided us to the state, but that's only a roadmap. Those are standards. They're actually not our curriculum. And if we are going to make changes to the program that we have, we need to, you know, involve community stakeholders, parents, community members, you know, people in, you know, organizations that can come in and help us have those conversations. And that is occurring in SAU 41. we have a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative. And really, a lot of the conversations that have occurred within that group, we have people on both sides. And sometimes those conversations can get very heated because people have strong opinions. But the reality is, at the end of the day, we can lock ourselves in a room, have really difficult conversations. And at the end of the day, what comes as an outcome is an experience that is really good for students. And again, our curriculum is dynamic, it's vibrant, it's always changing. We are not going to teach the same thing year after year. And we really do, find ourselves, being subject to a lot of what is happening in the world. We have a duty as educators to talk about what is occurring in the world. It really comes down to how we are talking about that, trying to remove our own personal bias as educators. And I know a lot of talented educators. They are really good about standing in front of students, delivering instruction that is void of their own opinion. And it really comes down to one really important piece, and that's critical thinking. Starting at the earliest ages, we need to teach our students how to be critical thinkers so that they can evaluate the information that they're learning and determine bias, opinion. And it really is such an important skill. And if you can have that skill in piece, all of the curriculum will fall into line.
Okay, next we have, currently board agenda documents are not available to the public even after the conclusion of the meeting. A password is required to access those documents even though they are public documents. Will you eliminate the current practice?
I would want to have a conversation with the board first so that I can understand that question. There's some context that I don't have. And I think for me to give you an answer to that question, and I know that's probably frustrating for the person who asked that question, but I need to be able to sit down with the board, ask them why, some of the practices they have exists. There's always a story. Decisions are typically thoughtful and reflective, and I would want to be able to have an open dialogue and conversation about why that practice exists and if it needs to change. And I want to have an open and honest conversation with the board, a trusting relationship so we can have difficult conversations. And I will push the board when necessary, because at the end of the day, I am the educational expert. But I have to respect the fact that school board, those are the representatives of the community I serve. And it's that dynamic that lends itself to us sitting down and having a conversation about how board operations occur, how I can support them, and how I can push board members to be better board members and improve transparency.
Thank you. How would you describe your management style?
That's a great question. I said to the hiring committee, I'm a collaborative leader. I have surrounded myself with really talented people. I acknowledge oftentimes I may not be the smartest person in the room or the most creative person in the room. However, I am the person who will determine and be able to figure out who is the smartest person in the room. I take great pride in my hiring processes. I try to make them as inclusive as possible because I really believe that I don't have all of the answers. I'm going to come into it and there should be no expectation that the superintendent does have all of the answers. The role of the superintendent is to find the answer. And so my leadership style is I'm going to seek out the opinions. Even in the short time I have spent engaging with the Hampstead community, I know that people on July 1, I want to have conversations with them about response to intervention, about SEL, about UDL. And I apologize for throwing around all the acronyms, but the reality is there's a lot of talented people in this organization. And we have to be careful that this is not an organization that is a hierarchy. The role of the superintendent is actually, I'm a support person. My job is to support really talented educators. It's to support and push educators as well. But you'll find that, my style of leadership is I want to hear from people. I want to hear from people, particularly people I disagree with, because I want to try to understand how they approach things so that when a decision is made, it's thoughtful. And there will be people that don't agree, but at the end of the day, that decision will be what is best for kids, and it will be an informed decision because it's a collective decision.
Thank you. Wait, Megan, I didn't just jump in front of you. No, okay, it's my turn. Sorry. I'm losing track. Technology departments support all district functions. What is your knowledge and experience in leading a school district in the area of technology?
Yeah, well, I have a great deal of experience. I think that this is a very exciting time to be an educator. I think back when I started in education in the late 90s, the new creative tool was email. And then I can remember the transition to the electronic gradebook, which was another exciting initiative. And again, it's very similar to the answer I just shared. I love having conversations with educators who every year they go to the Krista McAuliffe conference and they come back and they say, hey, I'd love to meet with you because I learned about this really exciting digital tool and I really like to pilot it in my classroom. I'd really like to try it with my students because I think it benefits them. And so my job as an educational leader is to help them vet that, is to determine how does it improve student achievement, how can I get them the resources that they need, because there really is, there's no delineation anymore between quality instruction and technology. There used to be. There's a technology path and there's an instruction path. I don't think there's two separate paths anymore. I think they're the same path. And again, I think the answer to that is I have to rely on folks within the organization to be able to become experts at all manner of technology that we use, whether it's the accounting software we use, the absence management software we use, or student management systems. And we continuously have to ask ourselves, is this the system or the software that we need to have operational efficiency? Because sometimes people get caught in a habit where they're used to the software that they have, they're used to the technology that they have, it's familiar to them, but perhaps it is not lending itself to operational efficiency, and we need to move in a different direction. And that's even true of student achievement. We need to continuously be able to look at that.
Okay, next question. How is your district able to negotiate a contract with teachers that allowed you to open fully in person?
A lot of conversation, a lot of meetings, and at times disagreement. We don't always agree. The one thing that I would say is that the associations that I have had the experience of working with, they have always had the best interest of students at heart. So we always have common ground. Now, the trick is we often have differing opinions about what is best for children. But when we started our negotiations, when we started to develop an MOA that would allow for the possibility of a full return, it really was done in the context of, okay, what is best for kids? And then what can we do to ensure the safety of students and our staff? It's not always pretty. It can't be. I don't view conflict as necessarily a bad thing. I think, friction yields forward progress. And I think it is, taking the time to have conversations. It is bringing your teachers, not just your association, but your teachers in general, involving them in the decision making. There are times where it is not appropriate to involve teachers in the decision making. And when that is the case, you do need to communicate to them, this is the decision I've made. And you need to provide them the why. They really need to understand the process that went into the decision that you've made. Because I have found when you do that, you get buy-in. You'll get teachers who will say, I don't agree with you or the decision that was made, but I respect the process that you took to get there.
Okay. Can you talk about diversity and how you can help recruit and hire a diverse staff, which we do not currently have here in Hampstead?
Yeah, so as the Assistant Superintendent of Student Services, the concept of diversity, equity, and inclusion are very important to me. Because again, my job is to ensure that diverse learners who maybe struggle with learning, that we're meeting those needs. So inclusion is really the hallmark of the work that we've done. And I want the same thing for all of the members of our community. Opportunity is giving everyone a seat at the table. We want to give everyone the opportunity, knowing that there may be various outcomes. And I would say that, again, it comes down when we look specifically at hiring. I think, we are fortunate that the demographics of New Hampshire are changing. I think that we're seeing a lot more diversity moving into the area. And again, I think it goes back to looking at that, that network that you built, being able to reach out to cast a broad net when you go to hire, being thoughtful about your hiring process, making sure that we're not discriminating against individuals, and really taking the time. The most important thing that we do as an organization, well, there's two things. One is our fiscal management of the budget, and the other one is our processes around human resources, hiring really talented people. And we need to make sure that when we are at the table, we're hiring people, we always have that diversity, equity, and inclusion lens on.
Trying to find the unmute button.
That's okay, Megan. I'm here all night, so.
Okay. So I have in my notes from when we first met, I've quoted you.
Uh-oh, that could be a problem.
You said that community engagement is your favorite part of the role as a district leader. Could you please elaborate on this as we have the community here tonight?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something, I want to give a lot of credit to the superintendent at SAU 41, Andy Corey. So now Andy Corey was the assistant superintendent in Londonderry under Nate Greenberg. Anyone who knows New Hampshire Public Schools knows that Nate Greenberg is like the rock star of all superintendents, and Andy trained well under him, has passed along a lot of his knowledge to me. And Andy and I spend an incredible amount of time together, and it's an interesting dynamic because we're two very different individuals. Of course, he's 6'6" and I'm 5'5" on a good day. And he's the type of guy who is he's the behind the scenes guy. He doesn't always like the spotlight. He doesn't always like being out in front of the public. And I'm the opposite. I feel like I do my best work when I have the opportunity, to attend the Rotary meetings, when I can go to a PTA meeting. I love showcasing the school. There's a lot of really amazing things that are going on in the Hall of Schools. I like to brag about them, the same way that I would do that for Hampstead. And I'm proud of the fact that, one of the things that I've done under my leadership is, we have an institutional membership with the Rotary. Why is that important? Because the Rotary is another, part of our community. In fact, a lot of the members of the Halls Brookline Rotary, they don't have students in the school. But they do a lot of really great community service. They tend to support our budget, and they provide a lot of support to the schools. They helped me build a greenhouse at the middle school. They helped me get a crosswalk across Main Street, across from the school. So I love the community engagement piece. It's something that I like to brag about the schools, and I feel like oftentimes when we're looking for support from the schools, we just need to let people know the really great work that we're doing. And so I'm the type of person that likes to be out there in the community. Will be the superintendent, as I will be the face of the Hampstead schools for the broader community.
Thank you. I'm going to do one more question, and then if you have any final piece that you want to speak to, you're welcome to. We had a couple more, but we're running out of time. And this one just came in and I think it's interesting. What books are you reading now?
Ooh, that's a great question. All right, so I have to, I don't read a lot of educational books. I read a ton of educational journals. I mean, I'm a fanatic when it comes to Ed Week. And I do that because I really like the quick hit read in education on a variety of topics, and I don't stick to one. I read a lot of financial books. And the book that I am currently finishing is a book called Die with Zero. And for any of you who have a 401k or a 403b or like investment topics, it is a fascinating read. It essentially flips this whole concept of that we need to save and save and save for retirement, and says, if you really want to maximize your life happiness, your what they call your happiness dividend, you really should, use your money and your financial resources to maximize your happiness. And I struggle with the concept a little bit. I'm a little bit more of a saver, but it's an excellent book. I recommend it, even if you're not into finance books. It's definitely a great book to read. So I also, prior to the pandemic, we have been reading books with our leadership team. And I had our leadership team read the book called The Leadership Challenge. Also a wonderful book that is, talks a lot about leadership. It's not specific to education, although a lot of those principles I think are, do apply to education. And essentially the Leadership Challenge is analyzing, 30 years of data on highly effective leaders in all sorts of industry, including education, but private industry as well. And really, what are the fundamental components that go into this to successful leadership? And it's really interesting because a lot of what we believe about leadership, there's a lot of research to show that a lot of our beliefs are, they don't hold a lot of water. They're really not research-based when it comes to what quality leadership does for an organization. So, but again, I go back to, I'm the guy who's going to read that really quick article. I love, sharing articles with my colleagues, them sharing articles with me. I have parents that, we frequently, particularly parents who have children with disabilities, they'll share articles with me so I can learn a little bit more about their child's disability. So that's more of the reader that I am.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
You're welcome.
If you have anything final, feel free. But we do not have any more questions at this time. Excellent. So I knew that I was supposed to prepare an opening statement. I was not aware of a closing statement, so I don't have anything prepared.
No, this is,
No, I'm really just kidding, Caitlin. So
doesn't need a statement, just anything you wanted to say to the community in closing.
yeah, I am a firm believer that everything happens for a reason. And I believe that the year that the Hampstead School District said, let's hire our own superintendent, coincided with the year that I was ready to be a superintendent. And again, what a privilege and honor, at the prospect of being able to be the superintendent in Hampstead. And I want folks to know that if I'm the superintendent of Hampstead, I'm a long-termer. I'm a good long-term investment. I'm proud of this community. I see the pride that folks have in the Hampstead community, and I want to be part of that. And I can tell you that I will be a good steward of the budget. I recognize that there's people on this call who are concerned about their property taxes. And I recognize that there's people on this call that are concerned about their child's education. I will be the chief advocate of every child in the Hampstead School District. I will help to cultivate their passion. I will help to lead them down the road. We will celebrate, our children's success together, and we will mourn their failures because there will be failures along the way. But I want this job, and I want to serve the community of Hampstead. And I look forward to that prospect and rolling into Hampstead on July 1.
Mr. Thompson, we thank you again for joining us today. Thank you for virtually meeting with our community in the way that we need to do this right now. And we thank you and have a good night.
Can I just make one last plug?
Of course.
I have
Sure.
been very, very impressed. I have followed on social media a little bit of, the work that is being done around the support for the bond for the Hampstead Central School. And I want to thank, the Hampstead Hearts organization, the board members, Megan being one of them. I toured that school, and I really understand why there are so many passionate people in the community that are pushing for that bond. And there's amazing work going on in that building every single day. There's dedicated staff, there's children that are learning at high levels, but that bond is necessary. And I really hope that whether I'm the superintendent or not, that community members will show up and they'll support that bond, and we can get a new addition built on that school.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
All right.
For members of the,
All right. Have
you're
a great
free.
evening. It's nice to meet the participants. So take care.
Thank you so
Good
much.
night.
Take care.
Good night.
So we do want to thank everyone who joined and who asked questions. I know there were a few we didn't get to, but we're trying to give everybody equal time as well. If you have feedback on our finalists, you are welcome to email Megan and I at our board addresses. They are right on the website. But if you need it, it's parnellc@hampsteadschools.net, Malcolm M@hampsteadschools.net. And we do welcome feedback.
And again, we thank everyone for joining in the way that we needed to do this time. It would have been nice to have our candidates in person, but this is the best way. And I feel like we were certainly able to have a lot of participation. Megan, I don't know if you have anything to add, but
Nope, just thanks everyone for joining.
okay. Okay, so everyone, you are free to go. I am going to make sure I stop this recording the right way and don't lose it.